You ready for something absolutely wild in Formula One right now? Because here's the thing that nobody's talking about openly, but everyone's thinking behind closed doors at Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton might be about to become the priority driver over Charles Leclerc, and honestly, if you've been following F1 for more than 5 minutes, you know this is the kind of decision that could literally break apart an entire team's dynamic and reshape how we think about driver loyalty in modern racing. Now, I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but according to Rob Smedley, a former Ferrari engineer who actually knows what he's talking about because he's worked inside the Maranello walls, this might be the only legitimate shot Ferrari has at winning the 2026 Drivers' Championship. And wait until you hear why the numbers are so brutally stacked that even the most loyal Leclerc fans might actually understand the tactical logic underneath all this chaos. The British Grand Prix just happened at Silverstone, and while Charles Leclerc took this incredible emotional victory that had him tearing up on the podium, something much bigger just shifted in the championship picture. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what makes this situation so complicated, so fascinating, and honestly, so heartbreaking when you really think about what it means for one of Ferrari's most promising talents. Let me set the stage here, because the championship standings right now are legitimately insane, and I mean that in the most dramatic possible way. Mercedes' Kimi Antonelli is sitting on top of the world with 179 points, which is a solid, commanding lead. But here's where it gets interesting, and where the real story starts to emerge. George Russell is right there behind him on 154 points, which means Mercedes basically has two drivers who are both completely capable of carrying the entire championship momentum forward. Then you've got Lewis Hamilton, who just finished third in the standings with 147 points, which means he's genuinely competitive and within a legitimate striking distance of the frontrunners, only 32 points behind the leader, which in modern Formula One is actually closer than it sounds when you factor in the unpredictability of the remaining races. But Leclerc, the guy who just won at Silverstone in a way that had him genuinely emotional on the podium because it was his first victory since 2024 and it represented Ferrari's 250th Grand Prix win, a massive milestone for the team, he's sitting fourth with only 108 points, which puts him a massive, almost seemingly insurmountable 71 points behind Antonelli. Now, 71 points might not sound like an eternity in Formula One, but when you've got 10 more races left in the calendar after Silverstone, when you factor in the unpredictability of crashes, mechanical failures, weather changes, strategic mistakes, and just the pure chaos of racing at the absolute highest level, that's actually a pretty substantial gap that's going to be incredibly difficult to close without some serious strategic intervention and multiple things breaking exactly the right way. And this is where Rob Smedley's analysis becomes either genius or absolutely insane depending on how you look at it and what your perspective on team strategy actually is. Here's what Smedley basically said during an episode of the High Performance Racing podcast, and I want you to understand that this isn't some random guy on the internet throwing out hot takes. This is a guy who's actually worked inside Ferrari as a race engineer, so he knows the internal politics, the technical complexity, and the strategic reality of what happens behind closed doors. He's saying that Ferrari fundamentally cannot afford to have an internal battle between Hamilton and Leclerc if they want to realistically challenge Mercedes for the championship title. Now, that might sound weird at first because on the surface, if you think about it naively, you'd think having two competitive drivers pushing each other would make the team faster overall, would create internal competition that drives innovation, and would give Ferrari the best chance to squeeze out every possible tenth of a second. But Smedley's point is way more sophisticated than that simple take. His argument is rooted in cold, hard championship mathematics and strategic reality. He's saying that if Ferrari tries to outpace Mercedes purely on car performance while simultaneously allowing Lewis and Charles to race each other freely with such a huge gap in championship points, the probability of Ferrari winning the Drivers' Championship drops dramatically and substantially in a way that becomes almost mathematically impossible. And honestly, when you actually sit down and think about it from a pure mathematical standpoint, when you model out the scenarios, when you look at the data, he's not wrong in his assessment. Let me explain why this is such a genuinely tough situation that puts Ferrari in a position where every decision they make could be crucial to their championship hopes. In Formula One, team orders exist for a reason, and while fans absolutely hate them, I get it completely, I don't love them either, there's something that feels fundamentally wrong about preventing a driver from competing at their full potential. They're a tactical reality that every successful championship-winning team uses when the stakes are on the line. The thing is, Hamilton is currently closer to the Mercedes drivers in championship points than Leclerc is, which creates this really awkward scenario where using team orders actually makes sense from a pure championship math perspective. But it feels absolutely brutal because Leclerc just won at Silverstone, he's got genuine momentum coming out of Silverstone, and he's showing that he absolutely can compete at the highest level of this sport. But the reality that nobody wants to say out loud, the truth that makes team managers uncomfortable, if Ferrari lets these two drivers battle each other for track position, for pit stop timing priority, for strategic decisions, for the best setup changes, they're essentially dividing their resources, dividing their technical attention, and diluting their strategic focus.
Mercedes, on the other hand, has a more straightforward and frankly more efficient situation, with Antonelli leading the championship and Russell essentially in a supporting mode. That's cleaner, that's simpler, and from a championship fighting perspective, that's more efficient for maintaining focus and maximizing points. Smedley's core logic is that the probability of winning this championship diminishes so significantly if Ferrari plays it safe, if they try to let both drivers battle equally, that they literally have to do something extreme and unconventional to have a real mathematical shot. Think about it this way. If Ferrari is split between supporting two drivers equally, and Mercedes is completely unified behind Antonelli, with Russell helping where possible, then Mercedes has a structural advantage that goes beyond just car performance. It's about team coherence, unified strategy, and focused resource allocation. It's honestly kind of brilliant when you think about it from a pure strategic standpoint, which is probably why Smedley is comfortable saying it out loud, because it's not some wild conspiracy, it's just championship mathematics. Now, I want to be clear about something here, because this is where my personal analysis comes in, and I genuinely believe this is important context that a lot of people miss when they're debating this. What Smedley is suggesting goes against the entire romantic narrative that we love about Formula One as fans and as people who follow this sport. We want to see drivers battle it out. We want to see pure talent win races. We want the underdog story, where the driver just outperforms expectations and achieves glory through sheer skill and determination. That's why we love Charles Leclerc. He's got that Ferrari red in his blood. He's passionate in a way that you can see, and he's shown time and again that he can absolutely deliver when it counts. But the cold, hard reality of modern Formula One, the thing that professional strategists like Smedley understand, is that championships aren't won by sentiment or romance or fairness. They're won by executing strategy perfectly, by making every decision count, and honestly, sometimes that means making decisions that feel unfair in the moment, but make complete sense when you're looking at the bigger championship picture. I think Smedley is being remarkably candid and honest by basically saying that this goes against his own personal logic too. He's not some heartless strategist just trying to be provocative or generate controversy. He's saying that despite his personal preference for open competition and driver freedom, the mathematical reality of the situation is so stacked against Ferrari that they have to consider unconventional tactics if they want any real shot at the title. The elephant in the room that everyone's dancing around is the fact that Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time world champion with an incredible track record. He's still got incredible speed and racecraft, and he possesses an almost supernatural ability to put together consistent performances when it matters most. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc, for all his genuine talent and his potential for greatness, is coming off a period where he hadn't won since 2024. And while the Silverstone victory was emotional, it was incredible, it was meaningful for him and the team, it doesn't change the fact that he's had inconsistency issues this season. That's not a knock on Charles or a dismissal of his abilities. Injuries happen, team decisions have consequences, and sometimes bad luck just piles up. but it's just the reality of where things stand right now. From Ferrari's perspective, if you're looking at the data objectively, if you're looking at the championship points, if you're looking at the reliability and consistency of both drivers across the season, Hamilton is currently the more likely candidate to close that gap to the Mercedes drivers and actually bring home a championship. And that's a hard truth that Ferrari management has to grapple with, especially when their own driver, Charles, just had this emotional victory at one of the most prestigious and historically significant races on the entire calendar. It's a genuinely tough situation because you're potentially disappointing a driver who just proved he can win when it counts. But here's where it gets even more complicated, and where the real-world factors beyond pure mathematics come into play. Because Formula One doesn't exist in some vacuum, isolated from the real world. There are optics involved, there's fan sentiment to consider, there's social media reaction, which can create PR nightmares, and there's the psychological impact on the entire team culture and morale. If Ferrari comes out and explicitly says, yeah, we're prioritizing Lewis over Charles, the backlash would be immediate and fierce and relentless. Charles Leclerc's fans would be devastated, disappointed, and angry. You'd have all sorts of questions raised about whether Ferrari actually committed to their driver, about whether they actually believed in Charles, about his Silverstone victory meant anything to the team strategically. Compare that to the Mercedes situation, where the role clarification between Antonelli and Russell feels more natural because Antonelli's already leading the championship anyway, so it's not like they're deliberately pushing aside the guy in front, it's more about protecting the leader. For Ferrari to make this call, it would have to be incredibly subtle. It would have to be strategic and hidden from plain view, and it would have to feel natural and organic rather than like an explicit edict coming from above that everybody can see and discuss openly. That's the political complexity and the delicate nature of the situation that makes this so interesting from an F1 perspective, and honestly, from a human drama perspective. Now, the really fascinating thing about this entire situation is that we're still right in the middle of the season, essentially. The British Grand Prix just happened, and there are still 10 races left to play out in the 2026 season, which means anything can happen, and I mean literally anything in the world of Formula One. Someone could have a catastrophic mechanical failure. Someone could be involved in an accident that wasn't
Their fault. Someone could hit a purple patch of form that nobody expected. Or someone could crack under pressure when the stakes get higher and the cameras are on them. That's what makes Formula One so beautifully unpredictable and dramatic sometimes. But it's also exactly why strategic decisions matter so much and carry so much weight. If Ferrari waits too long to make a tactical call, the opportunity might pass them by and they could find themselves out of contention before they know it. If they make the call too early, they might be giving up on Charles for no reason, and he could prove them wrong by turning things around. The timing of any decision like this would be absolutely crucial to the outcome. And honestly, it's the kind of thing that would be decided in real time during individual races, through pit stop strategies, through radio messages, through subtle positioning and car setups, rather than through any official announcement that gets made public. What's also worth considering deeply is how this situation reflects the current state of Formula One more broadly, and what it says about the sport. The Mercedes dominance with the Antonelli-Russell pairing versus the Ferrari situation is almost a perfect case study in how team structure and driver caliber combine to affect championship outcomes and overall team performance. Mercedes made a deliberate choice with their driver lineup. They invested in Kimi Antonelli as their future star, they brought in George Russell as a reliable second driver, and right now, that choice looks like it might be paying off in a big way. Ferrari, on the other hand, has Lewis Hamilton, who just recently joined the team as a massive signing that was supposed to bring championship-winning experience. And now they're faced with this genuine question of how to best utilize both drivers to maximize their championship chances. It's not just about Leclerc versus Hamilton. It's about whether Ferrari made the right strategic choices in building their driver lineup, and whether they have the tactical flexibility and the willingness to adapt if their original plan isn't delivering the results they expected. I think what Smedley's comments really highlight and bring to the surface is that Formula One at the highest level is an incredibly complex chess game, where you're constantly balancing multiple variables simultaneously.
driver talent and consistency, team resources and budget allocation, strategic options and race day decisions, political considerations and brand image, and pure luck and unpredictability. The idea that Ferrari might need to prioritize Hamilton over Leclerc isn't because Hamilton is necessarily a better driver in some absolute moral sense. Both of these drivers are incredible talents. Both have shown they can win at the highest level. Both bring different things to the Ferrari table. But in championship racing, sometimes it's not about who's better, it's about who's in a better position to deliver points right now. Hamilton has been at the top of this sport longer. He's won more championships, he's experienced in these situations, and he's got the mental toughness that comes from winning titles. Leclerc is younger, he's hungry, he's shown he can win, but he's also shown that consistency has been an issue. If you're Ferrari and you're looking at the championship mathematically, you can see why prioritizing the driver who's closer to the points would make sense. But if you're Leclerc and you just won at Silverstone, you're probably feeling like you deserve more support, more opportunity, more faith in your abilities. That's the human drama underneath all of this. As we move forward through the rest of this 2026 season, I think the key thing to watch is how Ferrari manages these two drivers and whether they start implementing the kind of strategy that Smedley is suggesting. You'll be able to tell by looking at pit stop decisions, by listening to the radio communications, by watching who gets the new parts first, by seeing how the team handles situations where both drivers are fighting for position. If Ferrari is smart, and I think they probably are given their history of hiring great engineers and strategists, they'll find a way to manage this situation delicately. They won't make it obvious, they won't make it official, but they'll subtly prioritize Hamilton while still giving Leclerc enough support to keep him happy and keep him performing. It's a balancing act, but it's one that champion teams have to be able to pull off if they want to win titles. And honestly, looking at how Mercedes is handling their situation, it seems like they've figured out how to do this pretty effectively. What I personally think about all of this is that it's a reflection of the reality of modern Formula One. This isn't a sport where sentiment and fairness always win out over mathematics and strategy. This is a sport where championships are won by teams that are willing to make tough decisions, teams that can manage complex situations, teams that understand that sometimes you have to sacrifice short-term satisfaction for long-term championship goals. I think Smedley's analysis is probably accurate in terms of the mathematics of championship racing, but the real question is whether Ferrari has the courage and the willingness to actually implement a strategy like that, or whether they'll stick with letting both drivers race more freely and hope that their car is just fast enough to overcome the structural disadvantage of not having a unified strategy. One thing that's really important to understand is that this isn't about Hamilton being a better person or a better driver than Leclerc in some absolute moral sense. Both of these drivers are incredible talents. Both have shown they can win at the highest level. Both bring different things to the Ferrari table. But in championship racing, sometimes it's not about who's better, it's about who's in a better position to deliver points right now. Hamilton has been at the top of this sport longer. He's won more championships, he's experienced in these situations, and he's got the mental toughness that comes from winning titles. Leclerc is younger, he's hungry, he's shown he can win, but he's also shown that consistency has been an issue. If you're Ferrari and you're looking at the championship mathematically, you can see why prioritizing the driver who's closer to the points would make sense. But if you're Leclerc and you just won at Silverstone, you're probably feeling like you deserve more support, more opportunity, more faith in your abilities. That's the human drama underneath all of this. As we move forward through the rest of this 2026 season, I think the key thing to watch is how Ferrari manages these two drivers and whether they start implementing the kind of strategy that Smedley is suggesting. You'll be able to tell by looking at pit stop decisions, by listening to the radio communications, by watching who gets the new parts first, by seeing how the team handles situations where both drivers are fighting for position. If Ferrari is smart, and I think they probably are given their history of hiring great engineers and strategists, they'll find a way to manage this situation delicately. They won't make it obvious, they won't make it official, but they'll subtly prioritize Hamilton while still giving Leclerc enough support to keep him happy and keep him performing. It's a balancing act, but it's one that champion teams have to be able to pull off if they want to win titles. And honestly, looking at how Mercedes is handling their situation, it seems like they've figured out how to do this pretty effectively. What I personally think about all of this is that it's a reflection of the reality of modern Formula One. This isn't a sport where sentiment and fairness always win out over mathematics and strategy. This is a sport where championships are won by teams that are willing to make tough decisions, teams that can manage complex situations, teams that understand that sometimes you have to sacrifice short-term satisfaction for long-term championship goals. I think Smedley's analysis is probably accurate in terms of the mathematics of championship racing, but the real question is whether Ferrari has the courage and the willingness to actually implement a strategy like that, or whether they'll stick with letting both drivers race more freely and hope that their car is just fast enough to overcome the structural disadvantage of not having a unified strategy.